You don't belong in this room. The words sliced through the air like shattered crystal, sharp and deliberate, meant to draw blood. Victoria Sterling, daughter of tech mogul Marcus Sterling, didn't bother lowering her voice. She wanted everyone to hear, wanted heads to turn. And they did. Before we continue, we invite you to reflect on moments when appearances deceived, when assumptions crumbled. These stories matter because they remind us that true power often walks quietly among us. Now let's return to Zara. The private suite inside the Metropolitan Club hummed with the energy of investment royalty, hedge fund titans, crypto visionaries, media moguls. Waiters in pristine white gloves glided between clusters of power, offering Kumamoto oysters and glasses of Dom Perignon that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But silence fell like a curtain the moment Victoria opened her mouth. Zara. Williams didn't even blink. She stood exactly where she had been, dressed in an emerald wrap dress that didn't scream wealth. It whispered control. No designer logos, no flashy jewelry. One hand rested calmly on her leather portfolio. The other held her phone mid-conversation. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Chicago skyline in all its evening glory. Beside her, security personnel hovered. Not by choice, but by protocol she had established. Victoria smirked. "Oh, come on. I'm not the only one thinking it. She's clearly not press. She's not on the speaker list. So who brought the assistant?" A man near the bar chuckled, his brandy sloshing slightly. A woman in pearls lowered her champagne flute, uncomfortable, but silent. The kind of silence that enables power, even when power is wrong. Zara said nothing. Her posture remained unchanged. Her gaze didn't waver. If anything, she seemed almost bored. But her silence wasn't passive. It was pressure building, coiled and ready. Victoria turned to face her fully now, emboldened by the room's nervous energy. "Don't just stand there like a statue. What's your name, sweetheart?" No response. The elevator chimed softly. 2 more guests entered, their conversation dying as they sensed the tension. One caught Zara's eye, recognition flickering briefly before he looked away. "You know what?" Victoria's voice rose another notch. "She's probably someone's +1, or worse, a brand representative. Are you here to pitch your wellness startup or something?" Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Light, careful, but it landed like intended blows. Still, Zara didn't move. The only sound from her was the soft tap of one manicured nail against her phone screen. Once, then silence again. It wasn't defiance she was displaying. It was something far more dangerous, patience, the kind that precedes an avalanche. Victoria rolled her eyes and walked away, victorious in her own mind. But this wasn't a victory. It was just the opening statement in a trial she didn't realize was being held in a courtroom she didn't own. The thing about real power is this: when it's authentic, you don't have to announce it. You simply stand still and watch everyone else fumble to explain why you matter. Zara Williams stood perfectly still. The Metropolitan Club buzzed around her with the familiar rhythm of entitlement. Crystal stemware clinked against Italian marble. Leather soles whispered across floors that had witnessed decades of deals worth more than small nations' GDP. Everything about this space screamed old money, old rules, old assumptions. And Zara, she didn't fit their narrow picture. Not in emerald silk, not with skin like hers, not with silence instead of small talk. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to observe. Every year, the Sterling Foundation hosted this exclusive mixer. Invitation only. Names at the door that could fund universities. On paper, it was a celebration of innovation and partnership. In reality, it was a chess match, and Zara had been playing longer than anyone in this room realized. No assistant flanked her. No PR team managed her presence. No designer logo announced her net worth. Just her reputation, and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. 12 years ago, she had walked into a startup pitch competition as the only black woman in the room. They had smiled politely, called her inspiring, and sent her home empty-handed. She left with no funding, but with something more valuable, a fire that burned clean and constant. Now she walked into rooms like this, not seeking inspiration, but offering judgment on who deserved to stay. From across the marble expanse, a hedge fund manager squinted at her, certain he'd seen her name somewhere. Maybe on a term sheet, maybe in the board minutes from that Singapore acquisition last quarter. But she turned away before he could place her, and the moment slipped through his fingers like smoke. Nearby, two women in their late 20s whispered behind crystal champagne flutes. "She's probably someone's lawyer," one suggested. The other shrugged. "Not dressed like that. Too expensive." They both laughed softly, the sound carrying just far enough to reach Zara's ears. She heard it, absorbed it, filed it away, because what? They couldn't know, what none of them could fathom, was this. Zara Williams wasn't just on the guest list. She was the reason the list existed. 3 years ago, it had been her firm, Phoenix Capital, that rescued Sterling Enterprises from near collapse. A $2.7 billion infusion when traditional lenders had turned their backs and competitors had circled like vultures. On paper, she remained a silent partner. In practice, she held the keys to every vault this room desperately wanted to access. But that had always been the point. Silence wasn't her weakness. It was her strategic advantage. So when Victoria Sterling made her cutting remarks when the guests chuckled and moved on with their evening, Zara didn't react. She simply waited. Because in a room full of inherited privilege and purchased positions, she was the only one who had earned her place through blood, sweat, and brilliance. And when the moment came, and it would come, she would demonstrate that truth not with words, but with numbers that would rewrite their understanding of power. "Excuse me, miss. This area is reserved for active stakeholders only." The voice came from behind Zara, tight with manufactured politeness. A man in his early 30s, perfectly tailored navy suit, hair sculpted into corporate submission. His name tag read, Bradley Mitchell, Senior Advisor to Sterling Holdings. He wasn't asking, he was informing. Zara didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Bradley stepped closer, his cologne preceding him like a warning. "Unless you're part of the logistics team or credentialed press, I'll need to ask you to relocate. We have some sensitive discussions underway." Victoria's smirk was visible from across the room as she sipped her champagne. This was choreographed, the way power prefers to clean up its own discomfort through proxies. Zara slowly glanced over her shoulder. No irritation flickered across her features. No confrontation sparked in her eyes. Just a pause, like she was offering him a chance to reconsider his approach. He didn't take it. Instead, he doubled down, lowering his voice as if sharing confidential information. "You don't appear to have proper credentials," he added. "These events require verification through our board's secure database, and I'm quite certain you're not listed." From across the room, a woman in a pearl choker whispered to her companion, "Someone really should screen these guest lists more carefully." Her date nodded sagely. "She looks more like public relations than private equity." Zara said nothing, but her phone screen illuminated in her palm. A text from Diana, her Chief Operations Officer. "FYI, Phoenix's 2.7B position still shows as active on Sterling's public disclosures. Want me to initiate communications freeze?" Zara didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she turned slowly to face Bradley fully. "I see," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Is there a specific dress code I missed, or just an unspoken face code?" Bradley blinked rapidly. Victoria, watching intently, didn't blink at all. "You're misunderstanding my intent," he said quickly, his rehearsed composure cracking slightly. "I'm simply ensuring we maintain the integrity of this exclusive environment." This Environment. Zara's gaze swept the opulent room before returning to his increasingly uncomfortable face. You mean the one funded by capital you no longer control? Silence. Not just from Bradley, but from the three people nearby who caught the subtle shift in her tone. Not louder, but heavier. The kind of voice that didn't need volume, only precision. Bradley stiffened. Are you suggesting you're somehow involved with Sterling's financial operations? Victoria's laughter rang out clearly now, sharp and dismissive. She probably read a few Forbes articles and thinks she understands venture capital. That's when another voice joined the chorus, not to help, but to pile on. A silver-haired man in an expensive blazer, clearly several drinks past professional, raised his tumbler toward Zara. If you're here for diversity optics, darling, might I suggest the community outreach floor? 2 levels down. The laughter was louder this time, more confident, more cruel. But Zara, she remained motionless. Instead, she whispered just one line, intended for Diana, still monitoring the call. Prepare the crimson file. Then she looked directly at Victoria and smiled. Not triumphant, not angry, just knowing. The room didn't know how to process silence, especially not when it came from a black woman who refused to appear shaken. Bradley adjusted his tie nervously. Victoria took another sip, harder this time. Her champagne, nearly gone. Even the background music, a sophisticated jazz ensemble performing near the windows, seemed to grow self-conscious under the weight of unspoken tension. Zara didn't say another word. She tapped her phone screen once. Not frantic, not dramatic, simply deliberate. Victoria leaned toward Bradley, her voice pitched to carry. Is it just me, or is she texting someone to Google what venture capital actually means? Another wave of forced laughter, brittle and uncomfortable, but it spread through their immediate circle. A server passed with fresh champagne, and Victoria snapped her fingers impatiently for a replacement glass. Don't just stand there, she muttered in Zara's direction. Either grab a drink or go find your seat back in general admission. Still, Zara remained motionless. She wasn't ignoring them. She was studying them with the detached precision of a surgeon monitoring vital signs before making the first incision. Across the polished marble floor, a junior analyst named Maya, mid-20s, her conference badge, barely visible, clutching a tablet containing client portfolios, paused in her rounds. She had witnessed the entire exchange from the periphery. Her eyes moved from Zara's composed, centered presence to the smirking cluster surrounding Victoria. Something felt wrong about the dynamic. Instinctively, she glanced down at her tablet, scrolling through the partnership documents until she stopped cold. There, at the top of the investor overview under Phoenix Capital, was a name that made her blood run cold. Zara Williams, managing partner and co-founder, board member, Sterling. Joint ventures. Maya's breath caught audibly. She looked up again, everything suddenly crystal clear. The silence, the unshakable presence, the phone calls, the absolute calm in the face of public humiliation. Suddenly the room felt like a movie where you realize who the real protagonist is 10 minutes too late. Maya stepped forward, not loudly, not confrontationally, but with purpose. Excuse me, she said, addressing Bradley directly. Do you actually know who she is? Bradley blinked, momentarily thrown. I know she's not a verified guest on our approved list. Maya held up her tablet, her hands trembling slightly. She's not just a guest, she said, her voice growing stronger. She's a board-level investor. Victoria scoffed loudly. Oh, please. She could have photoshopped that LinkedIn profile. I've seen these networking scams. You people fall for anything. You people. The phrase hung in the air like toxic smoke, impossible to ignore. Zara's head turned slowly, and for the first time, that evening her expression shifted, not to anger, to laser focus. She looked at Victoria, then at Maya, then back at her phone. Diana's message had just updated, crimson file synchronized. standing by for Phase 1 authorization. Zara didn't nod, didn't smile. She just whispered, almost to herself. Almost time. She's a board-level investor. Those 5 words didn't land softly. They detonated something fundamental in the room's atmosphere. The impact spread in concentric circles, subtle but seismic. A man near the bar lowered his whiskey glass mid-sip. Charlotte's confident smirk wavered almost imperceptibly. The background conversations dimmed as attention shifted like gravity, finding a new center. But Zara remained exactly where she was, unmoved and unmovable. Maya's voice grew steadier with each word. I triple-checked. She's not just involved. She helped underwrite the joint venture that funds this entire series of Sterling Innovation Incubators. A young man wearing a conference badge turned backward, leaned in from a nearby cluster. Wait, you mean she's that Zara Williams? Maya nodded, and with that simple gesture, the dam finally cracked. Phones materialized like magic. Not to record, not yet, but to search. Fingers flew across screens. Zara Williams, plus Phoenix, Zara Williams, plus Sterling Zara Williams, plus Forbes. One search result led to another, and her digital footprint illuminated screens throughout the room like a sunrise revealing a landscape that had been there all along. Images from previous summits. Interview headlines reading, "The silent architect behind billion-dollar clean energy deals." A photograph of her in emerald, speaking at the Singapore Economic Forum. One man whispered, "She controls $2.7 billion in active capital exposure here." A woman nearby corrected him. "She doesn't just control it, she is it." Victoria's voice cut through the rising murmur like a knife through silk. "This is all fabricated. She's probably some ghost investor someone hired for diversity theater. Daddy would have mentioned her if she actually mattered." From the back of the room came a sound, not mocking but knowing. A woman in her early 50s, red lipstick, impeccably tailored black suit. A media executive who had kept her phone face down until this moment leaned back and said clearly, "She didn't need your daddy's permission to matter. She owns his contingency plan." That did it. The crowd around Victoria didn't flee, but they stepped back, creating distance, hedging their social bets. And from the left side of the room, a small red recording light blinked to life. Marcus Chen, a mid-tier finance influencer covering insider culture, had started filming. He didn't announce. It just slowly turned his lens towards Zara. Maya noticed immediately. So did Zara. She raised one finger slightly, not in panic but in clear command. Marcus nodded and lowered his phone. Zara's voice returned, soft enough that people had to strain to hear it. Let them hear it. Don't let them watch it. Marcus's voice cracked back, barely audible. Understood. Then Zara turned to Victoria, who still stood defiant, still convinced of her own narrative, and asked with devastating calm, "Would you like to try that joke again?" Victoria swallowed hard. Not from fear, but from the first dawning recognition that she was no longer the main character in this story. "I've had enough of this circus." Victoria's declaration rang through the suite like a gavel strike, but it didn't echo the way she expected. Too many ears had stopped amplifying her authority and started questioning it. She stepped forward, her champagne flute catching the light, but the confidence in her movement had dimmed. Just a flicker. But Zara caught it. "This event is private," Victoria announced, her voice carrying the entitled edge of someone accustomed to compliance. "And this woman is creating an unnecessary disturbance." Several heads turned, not because they agreed, but because they sensed something shifting in the room's power dynamic, like watching someone shout orders at an approaching hurricane. Bradley seized the moment to reassert his authority. "I'll call security," he declared, reaching into his blazer for his communication device. "This has moved beyond standard protocol." Maya spoke up quickly, her voice cutting through their posturing. "Wait, she hasn't raised her voice once. She hasn't moved from that exact spot." Bradley shot her a warning look. "That's quite enough from you. But it wasn't enough, because Marcus, who had stopped recording at Zara's request, looked visibly conflicted, his phone still warm in his palm. And from the left wing of the suite, another journalist had entered mid-scene, Harper Stone from Financial Insider. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply pulled out her phone, pointed it at the trio, and pressed record. Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically. Perfect. Here comes the social media circus. Then she looked directly at Zara. Do you really want to play victim in front of a camera? Zara's smile was calm, almost sympathetic. I don't play victim, she said evenly. I play chess. Bradley stiffened. Security is on their way. Victoria added, and once they arrive, you can explain to them why a guest without proper credentials thinks she can waltz into shareholder-restricted space. A beat of silence. Zara tilted her head slightly, not defensive, just genuinely curious. No credentials? She asked. Her voice didn't rise, but the silence that followed seemed to expand, filling every corner of the room. Maya, now fully committed to the truth, stepped forward again. She literally underwrites this room's existence, Victoria. Snapped. Oh, for God's sake, will someone please silence the intern? That line hit like a physical blow, not just in the air, but in the crowd, because now the mask had completely slipped. The contempt was naked, undisguised. The room began to shift again, more noticeably this time. And Zara, she said nothing. She simply turned toward the main entrance, and right on cue, the polished doors opened. 2 uniformed Metropolitan Club security officers stepped inside, calm, neutral, professional, but alert to the tension. Bradley immediately gestured toward Zara. She's the disruption. The officers didn't move yet. They scanned the room, taking in the crowd, the cameras, the palpable tension. Zara slowly raised her phone and tapped once. On the other end, Diana's voice came through crystal clear, protocol primed, awaiting final authorization. Zara glanced at Victoria, then at the watching crowd. Then she said one word, quiet but absolute. Wait. Then she addressed the security officers. I'd like to speak with your head of security and your legal counsel, now. Not loud, not angry, but with the kind of authority that doesn't ask, it expects. And suddenly everyone in that room realized they hadn't invited trouble to their exclusive party. They had invited judgment. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. The taller security officer stepped forward with rehearsed professionalism, like he'd handled 1,000 disruptions exactly like this one. Except this time, he wasn't approaching just another troublemaker. He was walking toward a reckoning dressed in emerald silk. Zara didn't flinch. Her phone remained steady in her palm, Diana's name pulsing softly at the top of the screen. Victoria crossed her arms with satisfaction. Finally, you took your time, she muttered to the officers. Please escort her out through the service entrance. I'm tired of the theatrics. The security officer hesitated. Something in the room's energy felt off balance, like walking into what should be a simple situation, only to discover unexpected complexity. Bradley, desperate to reclaim control of the narrative, stepped in. This individual is not credentialed, not verified, and has been creating disturbances throughout the evening. Victoria nodded emphatically. And she was filming earlier, or someone was on her behalf. I'm pretty sure that violates our privacy agreements. Zara calmly lifted her gaze. I haven't recorded anything, she said clearly. Marcus across the room held up both hands. That was me, and I stopped when she requested it. Harper, the Financial Insider journalist, kept her camera steady. I didn't stop. I think people need to see this, Victoria whirled toward her. Then get out too. This isn't a press event. That's when Zara moved. Just one step, just enough to alter the electromagnetic field of the entire room. The taller security officer stepped forward again. Ma'am, he said, his hand gently motioning toward the exit. Victoria's smile spread like, Oil on water. She could practically taste the ending. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," she said. "Just walk out quietly like a professional." Then she reached forward, just 2 fingers, and touched Zara's shoulder, and that was the mistake that changed everything. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. Like air trapped in crystal, too fragile to vibrate, because touching her wasn't security protocol, it wasn't venue policy, it was personal. And it exposed everything. The disrespect, the entitlement, the fundamental belief that authority comes from bloodline rather than competence. Zara turned slowly, precisely. She didn't slap the hand away. She didn't step back defensively. Instead, she leaned in just enough and said, "You just entered liability territory." Victoria laughed, but the sound was brittle now. "What are you going to do? Call your supervisor?" "No," Zara replied with deadly calm. "I'm going to call your father's board." And then she tapped her screen. Diana's voice was waiting. "Understood. Phase 1 initiated. External communications frozen. Internal escalation pathway activated. Crimson. File transmitted to Sterling Legal, Public Relations, and Board Chair. Timestamp logged." Zara looked back at the security officers. "I suggest you reconsider physical contact. Unless you'd like to explain under oath why a primary shareholder was manhandled in her own funded facility." The taller officer blinked hard. The shorter one lowered his hand entirely. Bradley's mouth opened, but no words emerged. And Victoria stepped back, but it was far too late. Because Harper Stone had captured the entire physical contact on her live stream, which was now climbing past 18,000 viewers. The headline was already writing itself. "Investor assaulted by billionaire's daughter in space she funded." And Zara, she turned toward the crowd, not to address them, but to wait. Because the fall doesn't begin with screaming. It begins with perfect, devastating stillness. "Diana," Zara said, her voice low but precise as a scalpel. "Execute Protocol 2, full containment, real-time trace lock on the Phoenix node." There was no delay. "Understood," Diana replied through the phone. Sterling's equity dashboard just went dark. "Their entire digital communication suite is quarantined. Confirmed. Crimson file acknowledged by 3 board members. You'll hear from legal in 90 seconds. Victoria didn't understand the significance, not yet. But Bradley did. His eyes snapped from his phone to Zara's face. You had back-end access to our systems?" Zara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind her, 2 guests stepped aside to give her more space. Not from fear, but from dawning respect. One whispered, "She's actually pulling the plug." The other nodded in stunned admiration. "She's dissolving the partnership in real time." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "You can't just cancel a joint venture like that. There are legal safeguards." Zara turned toward her slowly, her expression unreadable. "I don't need to cancel it," she said. "I wrote the safeguards that do." The security officers, now completely uncertain of their role, stepped back toward the wall. Harper was still filming, her eyes wide with professional excitement. "I think you're witnessing a $2.7 billion exit happen in real time," she murmured, to her growing audience. Marcus whispered to no one in particular, "This isn't a takedown. This is a transfer of power." Maya, clutching her tablet like a shield, stepped closer to check her screen. "The Sterling Venture portal is completely down," she announced. "Error 503. Complete system failure." Bradley's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. That's proprietary infrastructure with multiple redundancies." Zara raised one eyebrow. "So is oxygen," she said. "But remove it, and people remember very quickly who controls the air they breathe." Victoria reached for her phone with trembling fingers. "No," she muttered. "This isn't real. Daddy would have told me about something this significant." Zara interrupted, calmly. Your father doesn't tell you everything, especially not about who kept him afloat when his Series E funding round collapsed. She took a step closer. You think he owns this room? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I built this room. Victoria didn't respond. She couldn't. Her silence said more than any defense ever could. Then Zara turned to the security officers, who were now watching, listening, completely reassessing their understanding of the situation. If your concern is protocol, she said, then you should know that as of 24 seconds ago, I locked the primary funding pipeline to this entire event. She nodded toward the glass doors. And once legal confirms the breach of conduct, she glanced meaningfully at Victoria. This ballroom goes dark, along with every license tied to Sterling's expansion fund. Perfect silence. Then Diana's voice returned through Zara's earpiece, crisp and surgical. Sterling Legal has responded. Board chair has acknowledged breach of conduct protocols. They've authorized your complete exit strategy. Official statement. Incoming. Public relations freeze activated. Social media tracking initiated. You are clear to proceed to final phase. Zara breathed in once, slow and steady, then said simply, Begin. The moment Zara Williams spoke, the room, once buzzing with self-importance, fell into a stunned silence. My name is Zara Williams, she said, her voice a low, steady current that carried to every corner. She introduced herself as the co-founder of Phoenix Capital and the lead investor in the Sterling joint venture. Her words landed with the weight of an undeniable truth, causing heads to turn like sunflowers tracking a new sun. She explained that her signature was on the funding for the building and the valuation of Sterling's R&D wing. She was the one who paid for the very logo on their napkins. Victoria took an involuntary step back, and Bradley, his face pale, stammered, That's not possible. You signed my NDA 18 months ago, Zara replied, her tone almost gentle. You just didn't know it was mine. The gasps began as people pulled up her name on their phones. A TED Talk, a Forbes feature, proof of her true identity was everywhere, a fact they had all chosen to ignore. Victoria's carefully constructed composure shattered. You lied, she whispered. No, Zara corrected calmly. You assumed. And I let you. Maya, watching from the side, said softly, She doesn't just belong here. She owns here. The room was hit with the crushing realization that they had all seen her and had chosen not to see her, to look past her, through her, and around her. You didn't want to know, Zara said, cutting through Victoria's stammering. She addressed the entire room. All of you spent the last 40 minutes questioning whether I was lost or out of place, or pretending to be something I'm not. But I was standing exactly where I was meant to be. As Victoria's champagne spilled from her hand, a silent drip of liquid regret on the polished marble, Zara delivered her final blow. I didn't need a stage or an announcement. I just needed one moment of your underestimation. With that, she turned and walked toward the entrance, not rushed, not flustered, but with the quiet authority of a sovereign. The aftermath was not chaos, but a heavy, stunned silence, the air thick with the understanding that they had been standing on the wrong side of history. As she stepped out onto the mezzanine balcony, Zara looked down at the city lights. Her phone vibrated with a message from her team. Execute total exit. She confirmed the command. Across 3 continents, the digital connection between Sterling Holdings and Phoenix Capital dissolved. Partnership contracts were voided, and credentials revoked in under 30 seconds. Inside the suite, confusion spread like wildfire. Bradley's phone flashed access denied. Panic set in as everyone realized their files and systems were gone. When Sterling's CEO appeared on a video screen, demanding to know what happened, a message on his screen provided the answer, Zara Williams. Action. Complete withdrawal. Zara stepped into the elevator, her reflection calm in the brass doors. Her assistant, Diana, said, "You've made history tonight." "No," Zara replied. "I just closed a chapter." As she walked through the lobby, a young analyst asked her what to tell the market. Zara's answer was simple. Tell them the market just learned how to spell respect. Outside, she dismissed the flood of messages and interview requests. The real story wasn't for headlines. It was for every room that had ever made someone like her feel like an accident. The car door closed with a soft finality, leaving behind a suite where power had been challenged, corrected, and redefined. The real power, she knew, was a quiet truth that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to be recognized.